Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you're doing okay. I'm gonna read through the full article. I think there's a link in the description. I will start off by giving you an overview, of a fairly basic overview, because there's so many intricacies within the story that it's too difficult to remember everything off the top of my head. But I will give you a basic overview in just a moment. Before I do, I will mention that really is a very fascinating story situation, and I don't mean to belittle the severity of the crimes for the victims. Heinous crimes involving sex trafficking, blackmailing, extortion. Um, it's about this guy called Larry Ray, whose original name is Lawrence Greco. He's 60 years of age. This guy here, and as of today, or perhaps rather yesterday, a trial started, and he faces 17 counts for those charges that I've mentioned: sex trafficking, blackmailing, extortion. He was living with his daughter at his daughter's dorm room in Sarah Lawrence College, and that's when this trail of extortion, sex trafficking began and developed. And it really is fascinating, in my opinion. They could easily make a movie out of this situation. I'm not trying to glamorize the situation in any way, shape, or form, but there's a lot of intricacies involved. So at this point, I'm going to read through the full article. Before I do, I'll just give a trigger warning. There will be points where it goes into details of the abuse laid at his, or I don't know what the right term is, but the abuse thrown at his victims, which includes psychological abuse in the main, psychological, emotional abuse, mental abuse, but also physical abuse, degradation, humiliation. Uh, he forced or strongly coerced, manipulated his victims in various different ways to do various different things. A lot of it was financial, but some of it was sexual. So at least one woman, was led into prostitution. And there's some details about a guy, a male student, who was, as I say, coerced, manipulated to perform some sex acts for no real purpose other than to put himself in a humiliating position, for the gratification of this guy here, Larry Ray, and also so that Larry Ray could further extort and blackmail the various victims that did regrettable things. So it is pretty nasty. It's very grim. It is torturous. It is torturous mental torture. So there's my overview. Again, there is a link in the description. It is worth reading through, but I'm going to read through pretty much the full article at this point. The trial of ex-con and alleged sex cult leader Larry Ray begins with jury selection in Manhattan's federal court today. Ray, 60 years of age, stands accused of 17 counts, including sex trafficking, extortion, money laundering, violent crime in aid of racketeering conspiracy, and forced labor, in a bizarre case that reaches back more than a decade. In 2010, Larry Ray, real name Lawrence Greco, moved into his daughter Talia's dorm room in elite liberal arts establishment Sarah Lawrence College, just north of New York City. Fresh out of jail following charges related to a custody battle with his ex-wife, Larry Ray slept on a dorm room couch and, prosecutors allege, set about dominating the lives of a group of his daughter's friends. According to the state, the convicted conman, who has also served time for securities fraud, began a campaign of coercion, abuse, and attempts at mind control, forcing more than one student into prostitution to repay the bogus debts that he claimed she owed. So we'll go into more details about that, but essentially a tactic which seemingly he used on multiple victims was to berate them, mentally abuse them, accuse them of having caused some harm, damage, financial, to him, and put them in a position where they confess to having done Larry Ray some financial harm, and in so doing, put themselves in the position whereby Larry Ray is able to demand payment from the victim for this non-existent financial harm, which he said occurred, which didn't occur. Hopefully, I've made sense there. But back to the article. He held court in a campus common room, presenting himself as a friend and father figure, and he used therapy sessions to gain students' trust, convince them that they were broken and that only he could fix them. That summer, he persuaded 5 students to move into a one-bedroomed Upper East Side apartment with him. According to prosecutors, that is when he really flipped the switch. Using techniques like those employed by the, if I pronounce it correctly, Nixivum cult leader Keith Raniere, he isolated the students from their families and began amassing compromising material, including videos and photographs that he then used to extort and control them. Among the evidence expected to be presented in court is data gleaned from the 44 hard drives, 37 cell phones, 5 laptops, 4 Palm Pilots, 3 cameras, 7 recording devices, and a polygraph machine seized by the FBI from Larry Ray's New Jersey home. So I'll just highlight that point there. This guy collected data on his victims, a lot of fucking data, pardon my French, videos, photographs, enough to fill 44 hard drives. I mean, that's extensive. No one has 44 hard drives. And then, that's just the beginning of it. He seemingly felt the need to own a polygraph machine. So back to the article. They also discovered Larry Ray's email account containing 200,000 messages and 4 iCloud accounts of videos, pictures, and audio files. Again, presumably recordings of his victims to try to have information of them such that he'd be able to extort them. According to the federal indictment filed June 2020, over the course of nearly a decade between in or about 2010 to the present, Ray subjected the victims to sexual and psychological manipulation and physical abuse. Ray extracted false confessions from at least 7 victims that they had caused harm and damage to Ray and to his family members and other associates. Ray leveraged the victims' false confessions to extort money from the victims, to force some to perform unpaid manual labor, and to cause one of the female victims to engage in commercial sex acts for Ray's financial benefit. He subjected students to hours of interrogation, bombarding them with false allegations of having stolen from him, or, even more outlandishly, poisoned him. Sleep deprived and threatened with physical violence and sexual humiliation, the students ultimately broke with many, making false confessions that Ray recorded and used to extort them for money. For example, the indictment cites several occasions in which Ray accused male students of having damaged his property. He brandished a knife and threatened to dismember male victim number 1 if he did not confess. So, according to this part here, Larry Ray randomly claimed that at least one male student had stolen from him or damaged his property. So Larry Ray threatened the young male student with a knife and threatened, pardon my French, to dismember him, meaning to chop his penis off. He held a knife to a second victim's throat and threatened to use it unless he confessed. And on a third occasion, he choked out a male student. So there are a lot of documentations which you might enjoy reading through within this article. Ray would frequently allege damage that amounted to tens of thousands of dollars, which he then held over his victims as debts that had to be repaid. Some drained their parents' savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars, opened lines of credit, solicited loans from friends, sold property, or provided Ray with free manual labor. And, according to investigators, at least one student was coerced into prostitution in order to repay supposed damages to his property and make amends for poisoning him. So, one poor female student didn't poison him, but she was effectively forced. I mean, they're saying coerced, but, coerced, forced, pretty much the same thing, into prostituting herself and giving all of the money to Larry Ray to compensate for the poisoning, which never happened. This followed several years of sexual grooming by Larry Ray of the victim named only as female victim 1 in the indictment, a process that included an occasion while female victim 1 and male victim 1 were still college students, where Larry Ray directed them to engage in sex acts whilst Larry Ray observed. Larry Ray pressed his victim into prostitution for at least 4 years, during which he took nearly all her proceeds, over $500,000, through force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion. On one occasion, he tied her to a chair in a hotel room, placed a plastic bag over her head, and nearly suffocated her, telling her to behave and focus on paying him more money. I'll give a minor trigger warning at this point. There's some more sexual details coming up right now. One male student who was questioning his sexuality described Larry Ray making a garrote out of crushed aluminium foil and twisting it around his genitals. The young man was also forced to put on a dress and go into the lobby of the apartment building in which they were living. On his return to the apartment, Larry Ray gave him a dildo and told him to penetrate himself in front of the group. Larry Ray is also accused of starving some of his victims by putting a padlock on the refrigerator while forcing them to carry out manual labor at a North Carolina property that he owned. Here's a picture of Isabella Pollock, who was Larry Ray's daughter's best friend. And the article will tell us in a moment that investigators initially believed her to be a victim. However, they seem to have changed their viewpoint. I believe they now view her as being a participant with Larry Ray, a lieutenant, someone that would scout for and groom potential victims. Larry Ray's daughter, now 32 years of age, has not been charged in connection with her father's alleged crimes, but in a surprise twist, one of the women whom the FBI initially viewed as a victim has since been charged as his co-conspirator and lieutenant. Isabella Pollock, Larry Ray's daughter's former roommate, will be tried separately, but was one of 2 former students with whom he was living and calling his wife when he was arrested at his New Jersey home on February the 11th, 2020. In March 2021, Isabella Pollock was charged on 11 counts, including extortion, sex trafficking, and money laundering. She has claimed that she was just 19 when she met Larry Ray and wasn't in a good place, and that he started to help me kind of process and make sense of lots of things I just couldn't make sense of. Isabella Pollock has claimed that Larry Ray quickly began instructing her to have sex with other men. Yet she has remained loyal to the man whom investigators initially branded her abuser, even writing an email to one of his alleged victims, calling her vile and accusing her of attempting to poison 5 people. Isabella Pollock's trial is slated to begin in July, and until then she is free on a $100,000 bail. For his part, Larry Ray, who has been denied bail 5 times, has claimed that he is the innocent victim of a sprawling conspiracy and that his daughter's friends poisoned him at former New York Police Commissioner's direction. So the Larry Ray met with the New York Police Commissioner in 1995. They were once close friends. So close that Larry Ray served as best man to the New York Police Commissioner when he was a detective at that time. In the year 2000, Larry Ray was indicted as a co-conspirator in a mafia-related pump and dump scheme. When he reached out to his old friend for help in fighting the charges, the New York Police Commissioner snubbed Larry Ray. Larry Ray's defense team is also expected to dig into his accusers' past in a bid to discredit them. So there we go. There's the full article. Hopefully that's been not too painful to listen to, but there is a link in the description if you'd rather go through that. Again, to me, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, extremely dramatic. And I don't mean to use these words inappropriately. I don't mean to downplay the trauma that these victims endured, which include, as we've seen, sexual humiliation, being coerced into prostitution, just mental, psychological, and financial abuse at the hands of this guy, Larry Ray, who seemingly was previously indicted as a co-conspirator in a mafia, whatever the right term is, scheme. I think an interesting part of this situation is this person here, Isabella Pollock, Larry Ray's daughter's close friend, or indeed best friend, who perhaps was a victim in the first instance. Perhaps she was, but seemingly, she became a co-conspirator. Allegedly, she became a lieutenant. Allegedly, she was attacking some of the other victims of Larry Ray. So is that a case of, I can't think, there is a term which I'm normally aware of, but there is that psychological phenomenon where someone that's kidnapped becomes overly attached with the kidnapper. Maybe it's a situation along those lines. But either way, this trial has just begun yesterday, I believe. I'd perhaps be interested in following it. If there's more articles that come out, I'll read through them. If they provide good quality, interesting information, I'll go over them again. But I found that interesting. Again, I hope you have. If you're still here, thank you very much for listening. And if you do like this type of topic, then please do like, comment, subscribe. I might be doing live streams at some point. If you'd like that, give me some feedback, let me know. And thank you again.